He hadn't said her name in years yet, the moment he saw those eyes clouded and wild. Something ancient in him broke loose. The jungle had taken her. The world had moved on, but his soul never did now, face to face with what should have been lost forever. He reached out, not with logic, not with hope, but with the raw, unspoken scream of memory. And somewhere beneath blood and time, she moved. Each morning, he rose with the sun, even though there was no longer a reason to rise so early. No feeding schedule, no soft rustle of breath behind the enclosure walls. But still, he moved through the routine with quiet precision, brushing dust from old notes, sipping tea he barely tasted. 2 sugars always never stirred, just like before. The radio crackled with the same channel playing the same songs from years ago, though his ears barely registered the sound. And outside the window, the forest stood, unchanged but not untouched. Every path he walked held echoes of something once warm, once alive. His boots followed the same trails, the same turns deeper into the woods, past the collapsed gate, past the moss-covered rock where she used to sun herself. And each time he passed the clearing where the grass grew higher, he slowed, but never stopped pretending he wasn't looking for her shape hidden in the tall green, or for the flash of white between the trees. At night, his dreams were unreliable, half memory, half hunger. She came to him sometimes in broken pieces, a flash of her eyes, the weight of her head against his shoulder, the way she once rumbled low and safe in her chest. He would wake with the sound of her name in his throat, but never speak it, not to anyone, not even to himself. And in the quiet hours before dawn, he sat by the open window, staring into the stillness of the dark, as if waiting for something impossible to return. Not because he believed it would, but because a part of him never learned how to stop hoping. It began with the sky bruising purple too fast, the air thick with a pressure that made the animals restless and the silence unnatural. Then the rain fell not in drops but in walls, roaring down like a punishment from something older than the earth. Elijah ran barefoot through mud and tangled wire, slipping, shouting her name over and over through wind that drowned everything. His hands torn, his voice raw, and still she didn't come. Branches snapped behind him, trees cracked open like bones, and somewhere in that chaos, she vanished one moment. There the next, only absence he searched until his legs collapsed, until the rescue teams pulled him back, screaming into arms that held no comfort. And when the waters receded, all that remained were shattered enclosures, mangled fences, and footprints that led nowhere. His parents said it was time to go, time to heal. But healing never came. Not really. Not when the only thing that had ever felt right was gone. He returned to the city, but not to life. The noise of it was unbearable. The people too loud, too fast, too whole. He answered questions with nods, kept his eyes down, stopped smiling. He could still feel her breath in his dreams. The weight of her beside him, the way she looked at him like he mattered, like he was her world. And without her, he drifted a hollow shape among crowds. Months turned to years, and the silence inside him only deepened. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that presses against your ribs and hums with the ache of everything unsaid. He carried it like a second skin, wore it through school, through conversations, through all the places where laughter once came easily. Now he spoke in short sentences, avoided photographs, refused to look at old videos. The boy he used to be had vanished in the flood too, replaced by someone who still looked like him, but didn't know how to feel without it hurting. Let me pause for just a moment and ask you, where are you listening from? Have you ever felt it? That sudden recognition from someone you thought had forgotten you? Maybe a person, maybe an animal, a bond that somehow survived the years, the silence, the distance. If that speaks to something inside you, share your story in the comments. And if this kind of truth touches you, don't forget to follow. There's so much more to come. It started with a photo, blurry and half-lit, posted in a quiet conservation blog, one he didn't even remember subscribing to, just a shape in the grass, white and worn thin. But something in the tilt of the head, the tension in the shoulders, struck him like a match against old stone. He stared for hours, zooming in. Breath held, pulse steady, like he was afraid of waking something. Then came the letter. an invitation to join a volunteer group returning to the region, and he said yes, before he could think. Of all the reasons not to back in the forest, the air felt heavier, every tree familiar and foreign, like a place half-remembered from a dream. Each footstep stirred ghosts he had spent years trying to silence. For days he moved through the work clearing, paths logging tracks avoiding the places his heart remembered too well. But then one evening, just before the light fell away, he saw her collapsed at the edge of a ravine. Ribs rising slow and shallow, fur-matted body still and broken. But the eyes held something he hadn't let himself believe in for years. They weren't just looking, they were seeing him. And something inside him shattered. The name slipped out without permission, without breath. Just Suri, and she moved barely. But she moved. And in that motion came everything the flood had tried to take from him. He dropped to his knees, not caring about the thorns or the cold or the eyes of others. This couldn't be real, couldn't be possible. And yet her gaze didn't break. The others tried to pull him back, said it was dangerous, said she was feral, but he knew. He knew that wildness wasn't fear. It was memory, aching to speak. And for the first time in years, the silence inside him cracked open. Not with pain, but with the sharp, terrifying glimmer of hope, the kind that hurts more than grief, because it asks you to believe again, and belief is its own kind of wound. He stepped forward slowly, each movement deliberate, as if any sudden breath might shatter the moment the tiger lay still, her sides rising with effort, her fur clumped and dull, her body no longer the sleek thing he remembered but beneath the decay. Something ancient stirred her eyes, met his, and for a heartbeat, neither moved the jungle around them. Blurred, fell silent. Even the wind paused. He knelt close enough to hear her breath. A shallow rasp like leaves dragged across stone. His fingers hovered, above her face, not touching. Not yet. And then her ear twitched, not away but toward him. And something small cracked open inside his chest. He whispered her name once. Not loud, not desperate. Just the sound of it bare and broken. And she blinked slow, as if, reaching through fog toward a memory, her nostrils flared, catching a scent too familiar to be coincidence. Her head shifted, barely a tremor in the grass, and he waited, not daring to move, not daring to believe. He began to hum, a sound pulled from childhood, from nights beneath canvas when the world outside was dark and wild, and she was the only thing that made it feel safe. And the moment he did, she exhaled, not pain, not fear, something softer, a vibration so faint he thought he imagined it, until he felt it again. A purr deep in her chest, like a question being answered. Her body relaxed the rigid line of her spine, easing. Her eyes never left his. She tried to lift her head but couldn't, and instead let it fall gently forward into his palm, and the weight of it, the trust of it, undid him. He closed his hand around the side of her face, and she didn't flinch, didn't growl, didn't pull away. And in that small stillness, something impossible became real. Because it wasn't logic or memory that recognized him, it was something deeper, blood deep, soul deep. And in that shared silence between breath and heartbeat, everything that had broken began to unbreak. In the days that followed, he barely left her side, sleeping, curled against the enclosure wall. Just as he used to, his voice a quiet thread through the silence, reading from weathered books, humming old songs, telling stories she'd once heard through a fence, and now heard again through skin and memory. Her wounds began to close, but more than that, the light behind her eyes returned, not all at once but in flickers, in the way she turned her head at his laugh, or pressed her nose to his palm before eating. He brought her toys rough-hewn from rope and branches, and the first time she batted one toward him, clumsy and slow. He laughed so hard he cried, not because it was funny, but because it meant she remembered how to play, and that meant everything. Each day she grew stronger, and so did he. The heaviness in his chest began to lift, not with sudden relief, but with the quiet joy of presence. The kind of joy that doesn't need to be spoken. One morning she nudged him gently to the ground and rested her, massive head on his chest, eyes closed as if to say, "I am still yours." And in that stillness, in that surrender, he realized he was no longer just surviving. He was living again, and her too. Not just existing in the wild, but choosing trust, choosing him, and, though the world around them moved on with its noise and headlines and fascination, he kept it all at a distance. What mattered was here, the warmth of her breath against his skin. The familiar rhythm of two hearts remembering how to beat together. Love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it breaks and rebuilds in silence. And when it does, when it returns with a truth deeper than words, where the wild still loves it, never forgets. Some bonds don't fade with time. They simply fall silent, waiting beneath the noise of life, patient as the earth when the storm has passed, and all that's left is breath and memory. He thought he had lost. Her thought he had lost himself. But what they found again was not just each other. It was the part of their hearts that had never stopped listening across distance, across years, across the ache of not knowing. Because real connection doesn't vanish. It lingers. It endures. And when the moment comes, when two souls remember at last, it doesn't arrive with thunder. It comes quiet as a breath, soft as a touch. And in that stillness, everything changes, not back to what was, but forward into something truer, something earned and everlasting.